I'm really excited about this lesson. And I think our dear non-human students also, they have already started writing their questions on the nakbang, taking a picture of it, and sending the questions over. Guess who made the start? As usual, Shatta Kiringla, our dear friend Miss Chiref. She wrote, I absolutely love the philosophy and system of Tak Zhen used in the context of reported speech. So interesting and profound. Genla, could you please summarize the formula of hybrid reported speech for us so that I can go ahead memorizing it and also elaborate a bit more on the use of the pronouns and the non-verbs and verbs. Tujenang. Tujenang to you, dear Miss Chiref. I'm with you. I'm also really fascinated by how the Dakshan system parades also the reported speech. And I don't think there's so much to elaborate. I think it's very simple, and I have seen that you all have understood already very well during your small learning community meeting. But I'll be happy to tell you the formula and talk a bit about it. So, dear Miss Chirefla, the formula is very simple. First comes the speaker. Usually, we put a cheda, the adjunctive particle, which marks clearly who was the person who said this piece of information. Next comes the quote, what has been said, and I know you are aware that we have to adjust the pronouns in such a way that sometimes there is this apparent mismatch. I'll tell you later when and when not. We end the quote with a se, sadembu se, and then comes the verb of speech, for example, sungwa or lapa, kechatiwa, lengyapa, whatever. That's the formula. You follow that closely, and that's it. There's one difference between Tibetan and English. In English, every quote can be reported in either direct or hybrid reported speech. In Tibetan, not. Listen to this. Let's say somebody just says, Tering namshi kipodu. Tering namshi kipodu. Today, the weather is nice. In English, we could either say, let's say Dashi was the speaker. Dashila said, today the weather is nice, direct reported speech. Or Dashila said that today the weather is nice. You see, you have two ways. In Tibetan, you have only one way. You can only say Dashila ki, and you see Dashila, the speaker, ki, the adjunctive particle, Tering namshi kipodu, the quote, se, I'm exaggerating, usually we just say s, labkidu. There's only one way, so that's a little easier. Reported speech is a lot of fun when you practice it in a live class or in your small learning community meeting, because then you can really report what everybody has said. And in this setting now, we can just imagine there's the speaker, Dashila, there's me, Franziska, reporting, and the person to whom I report is Dawala. Now, in terms of the apparent mismatch, we have that apparent mismatch when the quote is either about Dashila himself or about me, who is reporting. That's something for you to keep in mind, and I think it will be best if we make a couple of examples to illustrate this system, okay? So let's put this formula into practice, and we will take a close look at the pronouns and the non-verbs and verbs. We will make different examples, and you will watch out for the mismatch. First sentence, and I always advise you to begin with asking yourself, what is it that has been said? You begin with the original quote, and then you change the pronoun accordingly. So let's say Dashila, remember Dashila, the speaker, me, the reporter, without mic, speaking to Dawala. Dashila said, Nga tanda nangla me. Nga tanda nangla me. Dashila said, I'm now not at home. Both the nga and the me pertaining to Doug because Dashila is speaking about him or herself. If I want to report this using hybrid reported speech, all I need to do is changing the nga into Kong, because that's my perspective. Dashila being Kong. So let's use the formula. Dashila ki Kong danda nangla me sungsong. Dashila ki Kong danda nangla me sungsong. And here we have the Kong and the me, this apparent mismatch, which makes complete sense because the Kong is my perspective about Dashila and the me is the speaker's own perspective. Kong danda nangla mes sungsong. The second case is that Dashila says something to me. Dashila says, Kerang tengsang höle mampo chegi mindu. Kerang tengsang höle mampo chegi mindu. If I now report this sentence to Dawala, well then the Kerang becomes nga, and you will see we have again this apparent mismatch. How would we say this? Dashila ki, right? Dashila ki with the cheda, tengsang nga höle mampo chegi mindus sungsong. Dashila ki tengsang nga höle mampo chegi mindus sungsong. And here again, we have the nga and the chegi mindu, nga being my perspective, chegi mindu being his perspective, and this goes together like this. It sounds a little uneasy, and the thing is that when it sounds uneasy, that actually means that you're doing it correctly. So these are the two cases where we have this apparent mismatch. When Dashila makes a sentence about him or herself, or about me, the person reporting. We don't need to have this mismatch, and I know it's just a convention to call it mismatch, because actually it's a match, but we don't have that when he says something about Dawala. When he speaks about Dawala, he would say, Dawala lo chemar kongi lumpala pepte yore. Dawala lo chemar kongi lumpala pepte yore. Dawala and pepte yore, obviously both Jen. If I now report this sentence to Dawala, the Dawala would become the Kerang, right? So Dashila ki Kerang lo chemar kerangi lumpala pepte yores sungsong. What did he say? Dashila said that next year you want to go to your country. And it seems to me that Tibetan is easier than English, because in English we also need to remember to change the wants to want and stuff like that, whereas in Tibetan all we do is changing the pronoun and the rest we leave it untouched. Very important rule. Let's make one more example where Dashila makes a conjugated sentence about him or herself. Dashila said, Sangnin nga pöpe emchila dengar jogiin. Sangnin nga pöpe emchila dengar jogiin. And obviously, nga jogiin, that perspective, talking about him or herself. In hybrid reported speech, I would then report about Dashila. Dashila gi sangnin kong pöpe emchila dengar jogiins sungsong. And again, we have the kong and the giyin, and that's perfect. Something that happens often is that we drop that kong, because the kong and the Dashila is referring to the same person. So it is actually more common to just say Dashila ki sangni pöpe emchila dengar jogiins sungsong. And with no ambiguity, we will know that the jogiyin still refers to Dashila, right? So we do that a lot. And as I said, I really think it is very easy. Reported speech in Tibetan is easier than in other languages. You don't need a that. In English, we need a that, right? You don't in Tibetan. And there's nothing you need to change apart from the pronoun, as long as the sentence is not in Shesa. But that's a larger topic. So I really love it. Miss Girafla wrote us a reply in Tibetan. She wrote, Mama, 띵은에 답대보당 레라포 시보지도. 땅아 롭센 주두배 다트릭바데 펠치아 창자 인사래. 땅아 뷰맹기걸 십죽 떡참 지기인. 예차 공부 세리아데 셈친이나 샤모이나. 아니차 식발라소베 뷰베 멘추치땅 렌송알라 떡참 키엔사보통스. 디 소소 남떡참 에인. Thank you very much, dear Miss Girafla. Let me translate your reply for our friends. Oh, this is really simple and easy. So looks like I have already finished learning the grammar of lesson 16. I'll do some research on Tibetan medicine. Yertsa kumbu seyade semchenina. The Yertsa kumbu, is this an animal? Shamoina, is it a fungus? Anitsa sipala sope pepe menche chetang denso ngala toktsam kien sabotongsong. And the Tibetan treatments, such as checking the pulse and so on, they seem a little strange to me. I wonder, isn't that just one's own mind? Well, dear Miss Girafla, I'm happy to hear that you find reported speech very Lela Pushibuchik and Tapdebo, and I agree with you. And I'm curious to hear what you find out about Pömen, the Tibetan medicine.